It is our pleasure to welcome Rabbi Michael Satz to Holy Blossom Temple. It's our pleasure to invite his family to Toronto, and we'll get to know him over the coming days and weeks, but today is our first chance to learn from him.
Shabbat Shalom. As Rabbi Splansky just said, I'm Michael Satz, the new associate rabbi. Originally from St. Louis, I most recently spent the last 5 years as associate rabbi at Beth Israel in San Diego. And I know what you're thinking, San Diego. A lot of people have been coming up to me and saying, don't you know we have winter here? And yes, I know we have winter, so why did I leave San Diego? Well, of course, one reason is the opportunity to be here at Holy Blossom, a congregation whose reputation for learning and for serious learning, for serious praying, for your love of Israel really attracted me. And of course, a second reason is that my wife, Rabbi Janice Elster, was born here in Toronto. When she was young, the family moved to Vancouver, but when she came back to U of T, she worked here at Holy Blossom, and this was her Jewish home away from Vancouver. So Holy Blossom Toronto is a little bit of a homecoming. Now, I'd like to introduce myself more to you, and we have plenty of time. It would be my pleasure to meet and chat, and the door to my office is open. But I think at this time, and we've mentioned it throughout the service, that our hearts are with Israel, and Israel is in our hearts. As Yehuda Halevi, the great medieval poet, wrote, Libi b'mizrach ve'anochi b'sof ma'arav. My heart is in the east, but I am at the far reaches of the west. So maybe I can talk a little bit about myself through the lens of Israel. Now, I don't want to speak so much about the current conflict, but I want to talk more about how I came to love Israel and how Zionism gives purpose and meaning to my view of Judaism. Most of the formative Jewish experiences leading up to my decision to be a rabbi happened in Israel. It started in high school. I had the opportunity to study at Alexander Muss High School in Israel. It's a school in Hod HaSharon, a little north of Tel Aviv. That's where I first encountered serious Jewish study, serious study of the history of Israel, of the history of Zionism. But really, the most formative time when I was younger was spending a year studying at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. It's what we in the States call our junior year abroad. I arrived in Israel August of the year 2000, right after the Camp David summit between then Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton. That summit brought hope. I was very hopeful, and I think a lot of my new friends that I made in Israel were hopeful that peace and two states would come out of this summit. But if you remember, by Rosh Hashanah, instead of peace, the Second Intifada began. Here I was, living in the student dorms on Mount Scopus, the eastern side of Jerusalem, and riots were breaking out. Riots turned to fighting with weapons, suicide bombers, and military incursions. Needless to say, it was a stressful time. I was always asking myself, should I be taking this bus? Should I be standing in this big crowd, or should I be standing in this line to get into the mall? My friends and I were on constant lookout for what they call in Israel a chefet chashud, an unidentified object. You would ask, is this a bomb or is this just a misplaced backpack? That year, I remember I had a close call where I was minutes away from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, I'm telling you all of this not to make myself sound brave, but to explain to you how I've come to my feelings about Israel. In my year of study, many of my classmates left early or they didn't return for the second semester. The streets of Jerusalem were empty of tourists, and the shops and restaurants were closing all over town. I decided to stay because I felt that as a Jew, Jerusalem is where I was supposed to be at that time, to stand with my Israeli brothers and sisters. But I came to realize it wasn't just to support Israel as a state, as a political entity. It was to be engaged in my limited way with Zionism. Through study and reflection, I came to see Zionism not just as being pro-Israel, but Zionism is about what kind of society is being formed in Israel. I began to study great Zionist leaders like Theodor Herzl, Ahad Ha'am, Jabotinsky, all of the greats. They did not just believe in a Jewish state, just to have a state. They, in their various ways and with different programs, believed the Jewish state had an obligation to be a society that would be, in prophetic terms, a light unto the nations. I wanted to be part of that project. Zionism is not just the support of the Jewish state, it is the movement to continually create a Jewish state. Zionism is what gave meaning to me living in Israel at that specific time, because I felt Israel has a purpose. Of course, it also has flaws. Israel is not perfect. It is, as I said, a political entity. But Zionism is about striving and struggling to create a Jewish society that can be a model to the world. I wanted to be part of that project. After that year in Jerusalem, I returned to the States to finish my last year at university. After that, I returned again to Jerusalem for my first year of rabbinical school at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. Again, or still, the Intifada was raging. Throughout my 5 years of rabbinical school, I tried to return to Jerusalem as often as I could. I went back for a summer, I went for another semester. At that time, during rabbinical school, I became involved with ARTSA, the Association of Reformed Zionists of America, which of course is the sister organization of ARTSA Canada. And eventually I was elected as a student to the ARTSA Executive Board. I felt being involved in the promotion of progressive Judaism in Israel would be my way, my little way of contributing to the Zionist idea of a transformed Jewish society. I continued to study Zionism and decided to write my rabbinical thesis on Zionism within the Reform movement. As an aside, during that course of research, I had the honor and pleasure of interviewing our Rabbi Marmor in Jerusalem. I learned much about the debates within the Reform movement, about nationalism, patriotism, universalism, and so forth, and again, a Holy Blossom connection. I read a lot of the words of our former Rabbi Maurice Eisendrath. I was inspired by Reform rabbis like Judah Magnus, like Stephen S. Wise and Abba Hillel Silver. These were men who fought tirelessly for Zion when it was not a popular view in our movement. So this morning, I would like to highlight two 20th century rabbis whom I studied and whose words and actions continue to inspire me in my Zionism. They were some of the founders of ARTSA. They were Rabbis Roland Gittleson and David Polish. For both of them, Zionism was a natural part of the Jewish religious experience with its insistence on justice. Gittleson, who spent most of his career at Temple Israel in Boston, took umbrage with those who felt that Zionism and the state of Israel should be a, quote, normal state, that it should be held up to the same standards as any other country in the world. Gittleson wrote, and he wrote this in the 60s or 70s, one of the ideological leaders of American Zionism of his day wrote, reduced to its simplest terms, Zionism aims to make a normal, that is, an ordinary nation of the Jewish people. So Gittleson says, nonsense. This reduces Zionism not to its simplest terms, but to a caricature. We Jews have never been an ordinary people. This has been a seed of our problem in history. The minute that Israel, God forbid, becomes ordinary or normal, it will cease being a Jewish state. So the rabbi writes elsewhere that Judaism, and therefore Zionism, quote, must challenge us to confront compelling moral issues on the maldistribution of wealth, on discrimination in slums, on ethics in government and business, on sexism and abortion. On these and all similar issues involving equity and justice, we insist that the voice of religion be heard. If not, our emphasis on ritual degenerates into empty pretense. For Gittleson, Zionism is not just about supporting the state of Israel. Zionism is about being a state that inspires the diaspora and the world to transform, to fight for what ought to be, not what is. Rabbi David Polish, a boyhood friend of Roland Gittleson, they both grew up in Cleveland, of course, where Abba Hillel Silver, the great Reformed Zionist, was a huge presence. Polish spent most of his career at the synagogue he founded, Beth Emet, the Free Synagogue of Evanston, Illinois. He too speaks of Zionism in religious terms. He speaks of Zionism as a movement ever struggling for a more just society. He writes, implicit in Zionism is the sense of destiny, the sense of commitment to a higher society through the people of Israel and a higher existence for Israel through its restoration to its own land. All of this is implicit in the covenant idea. Polish holds that diaspora Jews have, in his words, a brotherly covenant. Maybe we would say today a covenant of siblings. We have this covenant with Jews in Israel, and therefore we need to support them, but also see to it that Israel's mission is being enacted. I quote Polish, perhaps we have asserted ourselves only as physical supporters of Israel and have absolved ourselves in its moral struggle. If there is to be an enduring relationship between Israel and the diaspora, it will have to be more profound than paternalism and foreign aid on our part, in living the full Jewish life on our behalf by Israel. Polish is saying that we need to be engaged with Israel. We, by virtue of being Jews, are in a relationship with Israel. What kind of relationship? This is up to both of us, to we here, Besof Ma'arav, at the far reaches of the West in the diaspora, and those b'Mizrach, in the land of Israel. But this relationship, this covenant, is about the creation of something grand, as Polish says, a higher society. Now, I hope you don't mind if I pause for a second and put in a plug for what we're planning on doing here at Holy Blossom, and because I'm new here, I don't have all the details, but I'll figure those out. But soon, in conjunction with the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem and the Union for Reformed Judaism, we'll be running a learning program, a learning series called I Engage, Engaging Israel Foundations for a New Relationship. As Polish said, we need to have a real relationship with Israel, and this program will be about studying our classical sources and modern and contemporary sources that help us think about what our relationship with Israel is as we study about Jewish power, Jewish sovereignty, questions of ethics, questions of minorities. We have this dialogue with Israel and its sources to help us come up with a new relationship with Israel, a new dialogue, a new way of having a conversation. And hopefully it will lead us to thinking of ways to continue to engage with Israel. So now, back to the sermon. I would like to try to connect what I have been saying about Zionism to our Torah portion and our Haftarah. And in fact, I want to pick up on the same verse that Rabbi Splansky picked up on when explaining the Torah portion. But first I will say that, as was said, our Haftarah is one of the Haftarot of rebuke that is chanted before Tisha B'Av, and it seemingly has nothing to do with the Torah portion. These Haftarot at this time of the year are not really linked to the Torah portions. But Yeshayahu Leibovich, the great Israeli iconoclast, points out that there is a verse in the Torah portion that is similar to a verse in the Haftarah. Our Torah tells us that the shedding of blood pollutes the land that the Israelites are about to enter. It states, "Do not therefore defile the land which you will inhabit, wherein I dwell, for I, God, dwell among the Israelites." In the Haftarah, God's words through the prophet Jeremiah say, "You entered and defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination." So Leibovich comments, God does not dwell in the land, but among the Israelites. It is a fact which makes the land significant when the Jews dwell on it. God dwells among the people of Israel only if they make God dwell among them. So God is among the people if the people make God among the people. God does not dwell among them automatically. Had God dwelled in the land because of the sanctity of the land, how could the land have been defiled by anyone? The land itself has not uniqueness. It is the people of Israel's actions that bring holiness to the land, that cause God to dwell there. So Leibovich brings a Mishnah to further his point. This text states, the land of Israel is more hallowed than the other lands. What is its holiness? Well, its holiness comes because one brings from it the omer. This is a grain offering, the first fruits, and the showbread. Leibovich explains, it is the observance of mitzvot relating to the land which imparts holiness to the land. It is not holy in it of itself. Because people are living through mitzvot, that the land is called the Holy Land. Because people are striving to live righteousness, striving to live in justice, that God dwells among the people. So let's take this lesson to Zionism. Zionism is about what Israel does in the land, what kind of society is created in that land. We too, the Sof Ma'arav in the far reaches of the West, and we too here in Canada in the diaspora can be part of that project. We can argue, we can debate, we can discuss how to do that, what's the best way. But because of our covenant, because of our relationship with the land, we have to be part of that project. I would like to end with a few words of prayer from Rabbi Sharon Brous, who's a very innovative rabbi in Los Angeles. She writes, "My prayer for those who love this tiny country of so many tears and such delicious chocolate is that we never lose the will to re-engage, to reimagine what is possible in a country built on the foundational principle of the Jewish people, that every human being has innate dignity and worth, that justice must prevail over chaos, that peace is always possible. I believe that we can still build an Israel that reflects the best of what our people has to offer the world. And it is this prayer that makes the tears that I shed over Israel tears of pride and joy, and tears of grief, but never tears of despair." Amen.